Okay, so moving along, remember our goal here is to now loop through a number of pages, make a series of calls, and get all the data from those pages automatically. So first thing I need to do is figure out how many pages I even have in my data. So we'll use the same URL here as before. Remember I got this total number of posts. We're going to use that to calculate the actual amount of data that we have. Because I erased a lot of our calls, I'm going to redo the the process of getting the data, but I'm just going to use this function now. So all we want is this parse data parameter or variable, so parse data, and now I can just use my function because this is just encapsulating everything I was doing before. So here I was generating the URL. I'm going to pass that URL into fetch, and fetch is going to give me the parse data back, and now all my code will work the same exact way. Okay. So once we have the num posts, we want to use that to figure out how many pages we have, and if it's 50 posts per page, all we have to do is divide this number by 50 to get the total pages. To do that, we also have to round up, right? Because there's no such thing as like 3.5 pages. We always want to round up, and for that we just need to import another library called math. Math has some further math operations like rounding. And don't worry too much about this. It's not like a math programming course. This is just like useful functions that you'll come across along the way. So now I'll just do a calculation to figure out the number of pages. I'm going to make a variable called num pages. And then here I'm going to say num posts divided by the number of posts per page. We know it's 50, but because we already have it as a variable, I'm just going to use this variable. And it's just like good practice. Because in case for whatever reason we wanted to change this count, it would update through the whole script. This by itself isn't quite enough for a number of reasons. One reason is right now these are integers. To get an accurate division, if you divide two integers, it's going to result in an integer, and it's going to round it however it wants. We want to control how the rounding works. So the first thing we'll do is just convert both of these to floats. Okay, so float is a decimal number, so it's just going to take both these and make sure that it's a decimal number. So when we do the division, we get another decimal number. Let's just print that so we can see how we're doing. Comment that out. Okay, just to make sure we're still on track here. Okay, so 5.66. So obviously there's no 5.66 pages. We just want to round up, right? So for that we use part of the math library called ceiling. If you guys know, like when you round something, it either rounds up or down. It depends on which is closer. But if you want to make sure it rounds up, in our case, if we round down, that's bad, right? Because we're going to miss this whole part of the post. Ceiling is a way to round up always, or to just kind of force it to round up. It's the opposite of floor, right? So it kind of makes sense. So math.ceil will round that number up. And the final thing we want to do is just convert that into an integer to make sure that now we're using a whole number. So if this whole float integer thing confuses you, don't worry about it. This is the thing you find out through troubleshooting. It's not like I know right away to put in all these conversions. If you get an issue like you're dividing a number and it doesn't give you a decimal, most of the time it's because you have to convert to a float. If you're getting numbers that are being treated as floats or strings when they need to be numbers, and you want a whole number, you have to convert to an integer. And you kind of just figure out along the way. Okay, and once we have that, we can print it out to make sure, and we can even kind of make a note to ourselves. So total number of pages. We can start combining these. Because this is an integer, if we're going to combine it with a string, we actually need to convert it back into a string. Okay, so total number of pages is 6. And now all I need to do is take all the code I had before, but now set up another loop. And that loop will actually loop through the pages and send a different request to Weibo every time. So now I can get all the posts from this place instead of just the first 50. And for that, I just set up another loop. This time I'm going to be looping through a series of numbers. So we did this last week. I'm going to say for I, and I will just be my placeholder for the number. I use I because it stands for iterator, but you can use anything here. I is just a kind of a typical thing that people use. So for I in, and I have this number of pages, right? And I'm going to use the range function again to give me the range of numbers from 0 to that number. Okay, so it's going to give me 6 numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and it's going to set I to that number in each iteration of the loop. All right, so now I'm going to get a new variable called page. I'm going to set that to I plus 1 because I want actually 1 through 6, not 0 through 5, right? So all I have to do is just add a 1 to that I. And this page will replace this page variable. I have all these variables set up. I have this very good way of creating a URL. And now every time in the loop, I'm just going to replace this page variable with the new page that I want to work on. But I can use the exact same code to create that URL. So now I have this new page. It's going to go 1 through 6. I'm going to paste this URL request in here. All of my parameters are getting carried down from the top. This is why I separated all those things out. But now page is going to go 1 through 6 every time. It's going to get that URL, right? And now we will put in our function to get the data from the web. So this is the exact same thing. We're using the fetch with the URL to get the new parse data. And then I am going to just put in this code we had before to get the same information, just to get those user IDs from that code. I'll uncomment that. I'm going to paste this in here. So just be careful when you're pasting things. You want to make sure that all the tabs are working right. Because this right now, I want this to be in this loop, right? So everything has to come over one tab. If I didn't do that, I would think that I'm starting something else here. It wouldn't work. In Canopy, it's pretty easy. Just highlight everything. You can hit tab, and it'll tab over everything. If you do shift tab, it'll tab everything back. So you can move whole chunks of code. Okay, so this will do now the same exact thing that we did for one page, but because we're getting this data and we're cycling through the pages, now we can get all the different posts. Okay, so once I do that, we're pretty good. I'm just going to put in some print statements so we can keep track of what's happening. And I'm going to print, this is something I do a lot, it's just really personal, but when I'm looping through chunks of data, I like to put in these kind of breaks. This will just print a line of dashes. It'll help me separate, make sure everything is going right. And then I'm going to print a couple of notes to myself. So I might say finished page and add that to the current page number here. And the last thing, looking at my notes, I need to do is when I add the page here, it needs to be a string. So I can smush this to all the other strings. I here is an integer because the range gives a series of integers. So I'm just going to convert this all into a string up here. So then when I use it as a string here, I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so let's try to run this at the risk of making my account invalid. I am going to reduce this sleep so we can see what's happening. We don't have to wait 24 seconds between each one. And I'll hit run. So there I went to the first page, got all the IDs. All right.